Hello YouTube. So this will be my second video. Found a slightly better camera, so a little bit better quality, hopefully. But the first video I did was my view on consciousness related to the unified field, being consciousness. And so if you haven't seen that, you might want to check that out before you see this. But this video is just going to be an elaboration on that. And I'm going to go into my view on the structure of consciousness. Since my view is the unified field is consciousness, the unified field itself has a structure to it. And so consciousness has the same structure because it's the same thing. It's like a mirroring structure. So, like I was saying in my earlier video, the unified field is space, and then out of space, superstrings pop out of that. And now, as you guys know, superstrings are the fundamental particles, and then they make up everything that exists, according to superstring theory. So this is where the levels come in, and it has to do with the levels of scale. So in other words, the levels of size. So as you get smaller and smaller and smaller, there are different scales, and those scales are the different levels, like macroscopic scale, microscopic, nanoscopic, stuff like that. So I've written out a sheet with the scales on it, and I color-coded it just to make it a little bit easier through the rainbow colors, red through violet going up. This corresponds with the chakras because these levels of consciousness are essentially, chakras is another word for the levels of consciousness. So beginning with the physical level, which is what we're familiar with, the macroscopic, where we exist, and then getting smaller down to the cellular level, to the molecular level, atomic, nuclear, subnuclear, and then the unified field. And these levels are sometimes considered, I think, grand unified, super unified, and then unified or something like that. But this is how I like to look at it with this type of terminology. And when I say subnuclear, I mean smaller than the nucleus of an atom, which is the fundamental particles or the superstrings. So those superstrings or fundamental particles are on this level here, the sixth level of scale, subnuclear. So how am I going to relate this? So these levels of scale, what I'm basically saying is consciousness is not in the brain. Consciousness is all throughout your whole entire being. It's not only is it in your brain, it's in your entire body throughout all of these scales. So all of your cells, even, your hair, your toenail, like obscure things, there's consciousness there. It's not just in the brain, but there are certain, I guess, concentrations of where that consciousness can be found in the body, and these are the chakra points. So the term chakra is a Sanskrit term which means spinning wheel of light. And spinning wheel, we can update that language a little bit and call it a vortex. It's a vortex of light. We'll keep the term light. So you have these 7 levels of scale in the unified field, and this corresponds to 7 levels of consciousness within human consciousness. Because again, this unified field, all of these levels essentially are consciousness. It's just different levels of the same thing, different levels of consciousness. So as you move through these levels, you alternate from one energy to the other energy. It's that duality that I was talking about in the previous video, where it's kind of like a yin and yang type of concept. It's like the ultimate expression of opposite dualistic energies. And so I wanted to just show you some terms that I have to describe this type of dualism. And obviously right off the bat we can start with male and female, and these are going to correspond to the certain chakras, and you can see that they alternate. So 1 would be male, 2, where this is backwards for me, I believe this would be 2, is female, 3 is male, 4 is female, 5 is male, 6 is female, and then the 7th chakra, space itself, consciousness itself, is non-dual. But all the other chakras alternate. Now when I say male and female, I'm talking about what people normally would consider to be the energies of male and female based on a certain perception that people have developed over the past however long period of time. This is not necessarily to say that certain levels of consciousness are exclusively male or exclusively female. Every level of consciousness has each aspect to it itself, but this is just something that I think might help some people to understand the types of energies that are involved with these levels of consciousness. So again, this is not to say that you have to be level 1, 3, or 5 if you're a male, and you can't be one of these levels of consciousness, or the opposite, but it's just basically a generalization to categorize these types of energies. So I'm going to run through these real quick, and then I'll bring this back up later to further explain and expand on this. So on this side here, the male side, we have more being focused in the moment with your perception. It's more of a thinking rather than a feeling. And when I say out of the moment, I think a lot of people who are spiritually inclined, they might take that the wrong way of what I'm meaning here. And I'll get to that a little bit later, but people tend to have a perception that's more focused on the past or the future if they're in these levels, and people tend to be more focused in the present if they're in these levels, I find. And that's what I mean by that. Individual identity, so you identify with yourself individually rather than with a group. And on these levels, the female, so-called female levels, we have a collective identity where people identify with a group more than they identify as an individual. And then here we have separative. This is a view that people will take where they try to find what's different between everything and analyze everything and separate into categories and categorize and things like this. So it's a separative type of consciousness. On the so-called female even number chakras or levels of consciousness, we have integrative. And that basically means focusing on the similarities between all things and how can you bring things together and basically make things more unified and see the similarities between things. So with that in mind, let's get into what I call themes or memes. And you can see here that this is a slightly more conventional way, I think, of looking at this. Rather than using terms like chakras, I would use the term levels of consciousness or themes of perception, maybe. And you can see that the very first one we have survival. And these levels of consciousness develop and evolve throughout time. So this will be the furthest one back. Survival. This is almost caveman style. And this is the so-called male energy, where it's more in the moment, so it's more reactive, it's almost animalistic. Anything you need in the moment. If you feel hungry, you go get food. If you feel thirsty, you get water. If it starts to rain, you find shelter. Just whatever's happening in the moment is what you respond to. And you're focused on basic survival. Okay? Then you move up to tribal, what I like to call the tribal level. Sometimes it's called the magic or mythical level. So this is where you have a collective identity coming in. You're no longer just focusing on an individual identity. It's like your tribe or your group is your whole identity. You would probably sacrifice your own life to save the tribe without a second thought, just like you would, cut off your hand to save yourself, because you don't really even identify with yourself, you identify with a tribe. And this is a level of consciousness where art comes in, like body painting and cave painting, language comes in, music comes in, as well as a perception of the past. So whereas this level here is focused in the moment, an awareness of the past arises here in the tribal level, where all of a sudden people start to learn from their parents. Basically, when you're like caveman style survival, you'll make a mistake 100 times before you get it right, and then your child will make the same mistake 100 times, and your grandchild will make the same mistake 100 times before they get it right. But in the tribal level, now you can teach your child how to do the first thing right, and then they can try 100 times and get a second thing right, and then the grandchild will try 100 times. Now they've got 3 things right, and you can start to accumulate knowledge like that. So on the tribal level, people get really borderline obsessed with the ancestors, with traditions, rituals, the ways of doing things that their parents did, things like this, and identifying with a tribe. So, by the way, as you move up these levels, you do what's called transcending to the next level, which means not only do you move to the next level, but you include the previous level in there with it. So when you're in a tribe, you're not trying to, you're not stopping to try to survive, right? You're still trying to survive, but now you've got this as well on top of that. So, okay. Now we're going to move up to the third. It's in yellow, so it might be a little bit hard to see. I'm calling it the power level. This has to do with willpower. And on this level, you've got a lot of power structures. So you're going back to the so-called male energy, more thinking than feeling, more individual identity than collective identity. Although you do keep, because you transcend, you keep some of the tribal identity, but instead of it being your entire tribe, it's mostly just your family. So you have a tribal sense within your personal family, like your spouse and your children, basically. But other than that, you're setting up boundaries. Here, on these levels, 2, 4, 6, it's boundary dissolution. You're dissolving boundaries. Everything's becoming unified and you're dissolving boundaries. 1, 3, 5, you're creating boundaries. You're saying, boom, this is a boundary. This is separate from this. This is mine. That's yours. Like on a tribal, everyone shares everything. You could go, hunt dinner and everyone in the tribe just shares it. But here, that's going to be yours and you don't want anyone touching that. On tribal, everyone's basically nomadic and they just roam around. But here, you have a piece of land that you claim to own and it's like your land and nobody else can go there. You have a family that's your family. On tribal, the way they do it is, everyone just has like a tribal orgy basically on a full moon or something like this. And whatever kids they have, it's just, nobody even knows who the parents are. It's just the whole tribe raises the kids. Everything is just super collective. But here, it's your children. And it's your family. And it's your land. And it's your animals. And it's your tools. And you can't, no one can get your stuff because it's yours and you've set up those boundaries. And power structures emerge that usually look like pyramidal power structures where you have a large number of people at the bottom who are like the peasants, like the tribal peasants basically, and then you have higher levels of power with fewer and fewer people, to the point where you've got like one guy who's like the ultimate level 3, chakra 3 ruler, who's like, you know, a king, a pharaoh, a dictator, a czar, an emperor, stuff like that. That's like very level 3. And you can see how this develops over time, right? So you've got the oldest survival, then you move up to tribal or mythic, and then you move up to power. By the way, I should mention, this is a little bit sporadic, but I should mention for tribal, people start to associate things. They start to have emotions, and they start to associate those emotions with things. So they'll look at, for example, a waterfall, and they'll feel something about that waterfall, and they're trying to interpret those feelings, and they're going to say, like, that's the gods of the waterfall. So they're gods. So religions emerge on this level, but it's religions with like 500 gods. There's like so many gods. Everything has a god. There's the water god, the rain god, the sky god, the sun god. Everything is a god on religions from this level. Okay, then you move into the power level. Then you move into what I usually call the religious level, which is, you know, you don't necessarily have to be religious to be on this level, but a lot of people who are on this level are. And when I say religious, because there are religions here, what I mean is monotheistic religions, where there's one God, one devil, and sometimes it's called the absolutistic level. I like to call it the absolutistic level because it's very, very absolutistic. It's either black or it's white. It's either this way or it's that way. There's no options. You're either a good person or you're a bad person. It's like their view of God, the ultimate being who is God, and then the ultimate bad being who is the devil. And like, that's it. You know, when you die, you either go to heaven, like the ultimate possible good place ever, or you go to hell, the ultimate possible bad place ever. It's either or. Those are your two options. It's very absolute. It's like forever. You go to heaven or hell forever. It's just boom, absolute. And so this is where you see, you can tell the timeline. This would probably be around the Middle Ages in the feudal system, something like that. And then you move into the Renaissance with the scientific level. If this level is black and white, the scientific level is all kinds of shades of gray. It's a lot more nuanced. You guys know the scientific level, people who are very rational, reasonable, logical, they're very fact-based, very materialistic. Oh, that's another good word I should have put. 1, 3, 5 are objective. They're focused with the outer reality of objects, and they value objective things. Like a scientific person would want, if you gave them $1 million, they would buy more objects. They would buy a bigger house, better car, stuff like that, because they're very objective and everything is their outer reality. 2, 4, and 6 are subjective, inner. Again, more focused on feelings, the inner reality. If you gave somebody who is, let's say, on level 6 $1 million, they would probably go traveling or try to have experiences with friends, stuff like that. They wouldn't want to buy more stuff, but this is more objective in the scientific level. Then you move into the spiritual level, where you see the spiritual revolution in the 60s and things like that, where people stop caring about better houses, and they start going for an inner search and a spiritual search, where, again, it's trying to connect things together. How are things connected? Everything has to be connected. On the scientific level, it's separative. Everything is separate. You got to break things down into their separate components so you can analyze this and analyze this separately and analyze that. Spiritual, how are things connected? There's going to be, you know, a chakra for a color, for a sound, for a planet, for an astrological sign, for a crystal. Everything has its connection somehow. And so that's the spiritual level. And then you move on to the 7th level, which I'm going to call the enlightened level, where it's outside of duality. There's no, if you've got thinking and feeling here, this is just like basic perception without really thinking or feeling, like a meditative state. There's not much to really describe that level other than just to say, you know, I don't even know what to say about it. It's like if you look at people who, like Eckhart Tolle, who was on this level 6, which is the mind chakra, and I'm going to go into the chakras too. This is going to be a long video, but his mind was always going and going and going and always thinking all the time, and then all of a sudden, it just didn't, and he became lighter, he felt at peace, and he felt enlightened, and that's what happens when you move into that 7th level. So these are the 7 main levels of consciousness that people evolve through time. And I described how the collective moves through these, but you can also see individuals, how when you're a baby, you're here, and then when you're, 2 years old, you move to the tribal, your family is your tribe, you want to share everything. It's sometimes called the mythical, magical level, where, you believe in Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy and stuff like that, and then you go into the terrible 3s or whatever they call it, and you can see how people move through these levels throughout their own individual lives and throughout the collective of humanity moving up. Another thing I want to mention is, I find this really exciting, how this was a long, long time ago, and then it moved to this, and as it moves up each level, it accelerates. It's on a curve of acceleration. It's slightly less time in between each one moving up, right? So the spiritual, the scientific level was, the Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, stuff like that, and then the spiritual level was just recently, and now we're starting to move into more the enlightened level. We're seeing people, more and more becoming basically enlightened, into the age of enlightenment. So these are the basic levels of consciousness that are associated with the chakras, and these are associated with the levels of consciousness in terms of the unified field as consciousness. So I'll bring this back up. So the physical level would be the root chakra, or would be the, let's say, survival, and then going all the way up to the unified field, which would be enlightenment. Okay, so that's that. This is going to be a long explanation. Okay, maybe I'll have to speed through this a bit. So here are the chakras. Now, these chakras, I drew them a little bit different. I like to draw them my own way. I just have a personal way that I like to do them. It's very simple. And I've flipped these two, I think. And I like to do this because I feel like from here in the heart chakra, there's a middle point right here in the middle where the energy is going down. And then from here, the energy is going up. That's why I like to do that. And then also, I like to put this circle here because it's on the female level, and I feel like it's more, I don't know, just something about the shape of a circle and the way that the geometry affects your awareness and your perception, that it fits better with that. We have circular symbolism here and here, which are even chakras, and then here and here we just have triangles going up, down on either side of the heart chakra, which is a triangle going up and down integrated. So I just like the way of drawing this. But anyway, these will be the root chakra, the sacral chakra, the solar plexus chakra, the heart chakra, throat chakra, third eye chakra, and crown chakra. And so these are in your body, And like I said before, consciousness is not just in the brain, it's in your whole body. You have consciousness in your heart. You have consciousness in your, in your gut. Like people say, I have a gut feeling or something like that. They'll use these terms with different parts of their body in a way that seems to indicate that there's a subconscious understanding of how consciousness is more spread out through the body than just in the brain only. Although the brain plays a big part of it, it's throughout the body. So I was going to say more on this. Maybe I'll make another video. I'm just going to move on to the next page, which is the glands and the hormones. Each chakra has a gland associated with it, and these glands produce hormones. Now this is not, I haven't studied this. I could be wrong on some of these things. So, obviously there are more glands in this, and each gland produces more than just one hormone. We see that some of these hormones are produced by multiple glands as well. But this is just my personal way that I like to organize it, to kind of simplify it, to show that, just so that people can get a feel of the energy of each chakra. So the root chakra, the first one, is considered more male energy, and the gland is the testes, and the hormone is testosterone. Second one, the ovaries with estrogen. Third one, it's hard to see, the adrenal cortex with adrenaline. In the heart chakra, we have a gland called the thymus with oxytocin. In the throat, we have the thyroid with serotonin. And then in the brain, we have these two glands, and this is slightly controversial, but I'm going to say that the pineal gland, I think, from what I understand right now, is the third eye chakra with a hormone called dimethyltryptamine. I didn't want to write it all out. It's called dimethyltryptamine, DMT for short. And then we have the final one, the pituitary gland with melatonin. So you probably know a little bit about these glands and these hormones, and you can kind of get a feel already probably for how these hormones have an effect on your consciousness, on your state of consciousness. If you have more adrenaline running through your system, you're going to be more fired up. You're going to feel more powerful, and you're going to feel that energy of what the third chakra has to offer. So same with DMT. A lot of natural psychedelic substances like mushrooms, psilocybin, psilocin, peyote cactus with mescaline, things like this. The term is like psilocin, for example, for magic mushrooms, but it's actually like something DMT. It's like DMT molecule with like a carbon chain off the side of it or something like that. So all these natural psychedelic substances are associated with this more what I would call spiritual level of awareness. And you can see that what happens is, as you activate and energize one of the chakras, the gland becomes more activated and it produces more of the hormone. And this has an effect on your consciousness, but it can work the other way as well. So, for example, if you're someone who's a level 5 person, who's a scientist, who is not very open-minded, they don't have their mind chakra open, their third eye chakra, but they want to have a more connected view of things, a more spiritual view, they could go do a DMT experience, like an ayahuasca experience, and taking that hormone will open that chakra for them. So these glands are associated with the chakras as well, and you can kind of see how that works. Just really quickly, I'd like to show some of the elements that I believe to be associated with these chakras. So starting from the bottom, we have earth, water, fire, air, sound, light, and space. So these elements, with the exception, I think, of fire and air, because I believe fire is lighter than air, But other than this, which I'm a little bit confused about, it seems like each of these elements become lighter, become less dense, and become lighter as you go up. And you can kind of see how each of these would be associated with these parts of the body, with certain senses that are also 6th and 7th senses. And I can talk about that in another video. But you've got the conventional 5 senses, then you have a 6th sense of intuition with the 3rd eye chakra, and a 7th sense of pure knowing with the 7th chakra. But anyway, I just thought maybe if I show this, it might help some people kind of click in their mind a little bit about what the themes of these levels of consciousness are. And just for fun, I made another sheet with other associations. And I just had a few. There are so many associations that you could talk about. I mean, I think I could talk about this for multiple hours on end probably, but this video is already more than half an hour, so I'm going to wrap it up. But just for fun, I laid out what I feel is the days that are associated, the 7 days that are associated with the 7 chakras, and the 7. Oh no, these are planets. These are the days, and then these are the metals, I guess you could say, that are associated with each chakra. So of course you have, for the crown chakra, the sun, Sunday, and gold. Then you have the moon, Monday, and silver. Mars, Tuesday, and iron. And Tuesday, I mean Sunday and the sun, Monday and the moon, that's pretty obvious. But then you might think, Tuesday, that's a bit strange. Well, Mars, Mercury, and the other planets, they are considered gods in certain traditions, in certain mythologies, and you have an association with other gods from other myths. So I think Mars is associated with the god Tia, and so that's where you get Tuesday from in English. But if you look at older languages, like some of the more romantic languages from Rome, from that derive from Latin, or derive from Latin, like Latin itself, Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, stuff like that, you'll see a much stronger correlation. So you've got Mars. In French, Tuesday is mardi, which is M-A-R-S-D-I, Mars Day. Same with Monday is lundi, which means lune, which is French for moon, like lunar and stuff like that. So I find it actually fascinating, and there's lots of correlations you can make, but I just thought I'd share this one. So then after that you've got Mercury with Wednesday, which again in French is mercredi, and then you've got, of course, Mercury as the metal. Then you've got, I can't even read that, Jupiter for Thursday, and that would be tin, and Jupiter is associated with Thor. So I believe it's the Greek god Jupiter and the Roman or the Norse god Thor, something like that. So Thor's Day, Thursday. Venus for Friday, and the metal is copper, and again French, vendredi. I don't know, I happen to know French, so I don't know, it's probably similar in other languages, but and then of course the last one, Saturn for Saturday, and the metal is lead. So those are a few associations. So there's so much more that I could talk about on this, and that I will talk about. This is really the first time that I've been outspoken about this. I've been thinking about this for a while, but I haven't really said anything about it, so it's not coming out in a very organized way right now. So I'm going to try to work through that, and hopefully this will become more and more concise and more organized, and I'll be able to get more information through in a shorter amount of time, and a more sensible, logical progression of information so that it makes more sense to people. But I just wanted to get this out there, so I just quickly made this video. And if you guys have any comments or questions about this, I'd love to hear it. So please, if you have anything, just write it in the comment section, and I'll check it out periodically and hopefully, try to answer anything as best I can. So thanks for watching and listening.